Weddings are supposed to be a celebration of love, a day filled with joy, laughter, and the promise of forever. But for the guests at this particular wedding, the night ended in sheer horror. What started as a beautiful ceremony turned into a bloodbath, resulting in the loss of 5 lives, including the bride herself, a jealous groom, a hidden rage, and a decision that no one saw coming. What really happened that night, and could this tragedy have been prevented? Before we dive in, if you enjoy true crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe and support the Sinister Crime. And if you're into horror content that will keep you up at night, check out the Sinister Cabin. This story takes place in Loei Province, nestled in northeastern Thailand, approximately 260 kilometers from Bangkok. Loei is home to Wang Safeng District, a serene area surrounded by towering mountains, lush forests, and winding streams. Village number 1 in Wang Safeng District became the setting for what was meant to be a joyous occasion, a wedding adorned with lavish decorations. The groom, 29-year-old Chaturong Suksuk, was a disabled former ranger and Paralympic athlete, while the bride, 44-year-old Kanchana Pachantwikan, was a well-known local beautician. Despite their 15-year age gap, the couple had already spent 3 years together before deciding to tie the knot. Saturday, November 25th, 2023. It was the cool season in Thailand, a time of clear skies and comfortable weather. In the early hours, Chaturong led a lively wedding procession to fetch his bride from Wangsong District, following local customs. The traditional bride-fetching ceremony was carried out with much cheer and excitement. At the bride's house, a religious ceremony was held where prayers were offered for a blessed and prosperous marriage. Then, at precisely 4 p.m., the official wedding ceremony commenced. Dressed in exquisite traditional Thai attire, Chaturong and Kanchana knelt before their parents, paying their respects. They exchanged rings, solidifying the commitment they had built over the years. The atmosphere buzzed with happiness and celebration as family and friends shared in their joy. As the evening approached, the wedding banquet began. Tables were filled with delicious local delicacies, and the air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and chatter. Guests celebrated the newlyweds, toasting to their future. But then something shifted. No one, absolutely no one, could have foreseen the horror that would soon unfold. It seemed a dispute had broken out between the bride and groom. Shortly after, Chaturong sat alone at a dining table, his face solemn, his body language distant. He wasn't speaking to anyone. Some guests took notice, but most dismissed it. Perhaps he had drunk too much or was simply exhausted from the day's excitement. Still, whispers spread among the guests as the celebrations continued with oblivious joy. Around 11:25 p.m., Chaturong suddenly stood up and walked straight toward the door. His abrupt movement caught the attention of those nearby. Guests exchanged whispers, their curiosity and concern growing. 2 individuals approached Kanchana, asking if she knew what was wrong. Before she could answer, Chaturong reappeared, his expression unreadable, his right hand tucked into his pocket. The murmuring stopped. Every eye in the room was now fixed on him. Then, without warning, Chaturong pulled a firearm from his pocket and fired 12 rapid shots in just 20 seconds. Panic erupted. Kanchana and several others nearby collapsed, their screams drowned out by the chaos that followed. Guests shrieked, ducking for cover, running in every direction, desperate to escape the horror unfolding before them. And then, just as swiftly as it had begun, Chaturong turned the firearm on himself, ending his own life. As soon as the chaos decreased, some guests, now trembling with fear, managed to call the police. When the officers arrived, they were met with an unimaginable scene, a wedding venue in complete disarray. Tables and chairs lay overturned, shattered beer bottles and broken decorations littered the floor. But the most chilling sight was the 5 bodies sprawled in the center of the venue, while other guests cowered in corners, still in shock. An elderly neighbor who lived near the venue recalled hearing loud bangs that night. At first, they assumed it was fireworks, a typical wedding celebration. It wasn't until later that they realized the chilling reality. An initial investigation confirmed 3 fatalities: the bride, Kanchana, her mother, and her younger sister. 2 additional victims, guests who had been standing near Kanchana moments before the shooting, had tried to intervene but were caught in the firing. One of them, a 50-year-old man named Thong Nong Kunthad, succumbed to his injuries on the spot. The other, 28-year-old Bamrung Chatharat, was critically wounded and was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. At the crime scene, police recovered 11 9mm bullet casings. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered details about Chattarong's past. He had once been a promising Marine stationed at a naval base in Chonburi, but his future was abruptly derailed when a devastating accident cost him his right leg. Forced into early retirement, his once bright career was over. Yet, instead of giving up, he worked hard to rebuild his life. Determined to remain active, Chattarong took a job as a forest protector. He channeled his military discipline into sport, dedicating himself to training as a disabled athlete. His resilience and determination paid off. Through rigorous training, he excelled in both swimming and archery, eventually representing Thailand in the 11th ASEAN Para Games in Indonesia in 2022. There, he won a silver medal in swimming, becoming a symbol of determination and strength. In December 2023, just a week after his wedding, another international sports event for disabled athletes was set to take place in Nakhon Province, Thailand. Chattarong had planned to participate, and many believed he would once again prove his remarkable ability. But fate had other plans. Kanchana, the 44-year-old bride, was a well-known beautician with a radiant, sociable personality. Many envied her youthful appearance. Despite her age, her meticulous skincare routine kept her looking much younger than she was. It was difficult to tell that she and Chattarong were 15 years apart. Before meeting Chattarong, Kanchana had been married once before. Though the marriage ended in divorce, she remained devoted to her 2 children, sharing custody with her ex-husband. Even after moving in with Chattarong, she continued visiting her children, often stopping by her ex-husband's home. To her, it was simply part of co-parenting. But to Chattarong, it was something else entirely. His jealousy was undeniable. The thought of Kanchana speaking to another man, even if it was the father of her children, troubled him. He struggled with insecurity, becoming increasingly possessive. Arguments over this became frequent, yet Kanchana never saw it as a serious issue. She assumed it was normal jealousy, nothing that would truly threaten their relationship. For 3 years, she tried to nurture their bond, believing her patience and understanding would help them build a stable family together. But things were far more complicated than she had imagined. In the end, all the little red flags, the insecurities, the possessiveness, the suppressed resentment, culminated in an explosion of violence. A wedding meant to celebrate love became the setting of an unthinkable tragedy, leaving behind a tale of heartbreak, devastation, and questions that may never be answered. In the aftermath of the wedding massacre, the police sought further insights from friends and relatives of both the bride and groom. A close friend of Chattarong revealed a deeply troubling truth. Despite his many accomplishments, he was far from the confident man he appeared to be. Beneath the surface, he was plagued by insecurities. The 15-year age gap between him and Kanchana, their vastly different life experiences, and his own physical limitations weighed heavily on him. He constantly compared himself to other men, convinced that he would never measure up to someone normal. Even though Kanchana was patient and supportive, her kindness only intensified his fears. He lived with the persistent anxiety that one day she would leave him for someone better, someone wealthier, more capable, more whole. His deepest paranoia revolved around her continued interactions with her ex-husband. Each time she visited her children, Chattarong was convinced she was using them as an excuse to see her former spouse. In his mind, he was constantly competing with a man from her past, and the fear of losing her consumed him. Psychologists later suggested that Chattarong's insecurities and jealousy should have been addressed through open and honest conversation. Some experts speculated that if Kanchana had recognized his inner turmoil sooner, She might have helped him process his emotions, strengthening their relationship and possibly preventing the tragedy. They also noted that his final actions pointed to an extreme emotional breakdown potentially linked to an underlying mental health issue. However, without proper assessment, it was impossible to determine if he had been struggling with an undiagnosed disorder. What was clear was that his deep-seated fears, possessiveness, and inability to handle rejection all played a role in the devastating events of that night. A wedding guest who had been present at the reception recalled an argument between the newlyweds before the shooting. Although they kept their voices low to avoid alarming the guests, the tension between them was obvious. Chaturang, visibly furious, had a flushed face while Kanchana remained composed. The guest overheard fragments of their conversation. Chaturang wanted Kanchana to contribute part of the wedding money to cover the expenses, seeing it as a shared investment in their future. But Kanchana refused. To her, it was an unreasonable demand. To Chaturang, it was confirmation of his worst fear. She had no intention of staying with him for the long haul. After the argument, Chaturang sat alone at the dining table, drinking. Perhaps the alcohol intensified his emotions. His deep insecurities and jealousy started to show. But with the wedding still going on, he had no way to release his growing anger. It was then that he made the fateful decision to leave the table, step outside, and retrieve the gun from his car. Investigators later confirmed that the gun and ammunition Chaturang used were legally obtained. Having been in the military, he had developed an interest in firearms even after his discharge. This, including his unpredictable emotions, created a lethal combination. In the days that followed, grief and devastation swept through the families of the victims. Relatives held a funeral for Kanchana, her mother, and her sister. Chaturang's body was taken back to a temple in his hometown, while Tong Nongkunthud, who had tragically lost his life, was returned to his family for burial. Thailand has long ranked among the countries with the highest gun ownership and shooting incidents in Asia. Statistics reveal that the country has approximately 10.3 million registered firearms, equating to 15 guns for every 100 people, the highest rate in the region. On average, nearly 4 out of every 100,000 individuals lose their lives to gun violence in Thailand, placing it second in ASEAN after the Philippines. In response to growing concerns over gun-related crimes, Deputy Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul signed an administrative order on 23 November 2023, temporarily halting the issuance of gun licenses for 1 year. This was a desperate attempt to curb the escalating crisis. But what no one knew at the time was that just 2 days later, a wedding would turn into a bloodbath, shocking the nation once again. While the temporary suspension of gun licenses introduced is a step towards reform, experts argue that legal restrictions alone are not enough. Without proper psychological support, stricter enforcement of firearm regulations, and community-driven education on emotional regulation, the cycle of violence is unlikely to be broken. Only by addressing the deeper underlying issues can Thailand truly hope to foster a safer and more secure environment for its people. This wedding was meant to be the happiest day of Chaturang and Kanchana's lives, but instead it became one of Thailand's most shocking wedding massacres. Was it years of jealousy and insecurity that led to this tragic end? Or was there something even darker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to support the channel by liking this video and subscribing to the Sinister Crime for more true crime stories. And for those of you who love horror, make sure to check out the Sinister Cabin. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and I'll see you in the next episode.